I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Whoopsie. All right. What's going on, guys? Happy Thursday. Welcome back. I hope you guys have had a great week so far. So we're going to do the damn thing tonight. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. What is up, guys? Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And let's go ahead and get started. I want to give shout outs to people in the chat. Got interesting stories tonight, and we are going to do call-in tonight as well. What's going on? Soul says, hi again, Sabby. The soul loves you. Thank you so much, Soul. Kind of reminds me of that song, The Soul Sonic Force. Old school rap song. What's going on? Hannah G says, Pete looks funny in that picture. We'll get to that. What's up, good cookies? Not just in that picture, but Pete looks funny in general. Oh, dear, guys. What's going on? Gamer says, hello. Greetings, Sean says, you're. Greetings, Negro 489. Defund the Pentagon. I can get down with that. Shout out to Sun Moon says, hi, gamer. Greetings. Whoops, skipped one. Saul Good says, sup back at ya. Greeting Lorez says, sup, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. That Tulsa appearance, wow, LOL. I think you mean Tulsi appearance. Yeah, what is up? Shout out to Angela, who's a Sabby member, says, greetings all. Hope the weird week between Christmas and New Year's has been a good one. Greetings, Arif says, Reaganism kills. Shout out to CBC Voter says, happy everyone. Greetings, JM. Thank you so much for the super sticker there. And JM is also a Sabby member. Shout out to Bling Girl says, peace. Greetings, my comrade JB says, good evening, all you beautiful people. Doobie, make sure you hawk smash that like button. Forehead kisses. Yes, guys, don't forget to hit that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Shout out to Vera says, hello, Sabby. Hello, Vera. Greetings, Mastermind says, we living in a sangster's paradise. You're taking me back to Coolio days. Shout out to Want to See More. Bye 2022. I done with you. I feel you. I feel you there. Greetings, CNC68. Is this the Tulsi with Tucker label? Butt tearing she did. We will get into it. Shout out to Robert says, wake me up in 2050. I don't know if I want to fast forward that quick though, Robert, because climate change is supposed to be pretty brutal around that time. So I don't know if I want to fast forward. Maybe we can go back. Let's go back in time. Shout out Eric Gray says, sup, y'all. What's going on? Jay Tolbert says, good evening, Sabby, and everyone in the chat. Tulsi showed that dude no mercy whatsoever. Yes. I can't wait to get into that discussion. Greetings, Delthea is a Sabby member, says, hello, all you beautiful people. Shout out to Desert Mantis says, it's fun time. Yay. Greetings, Terry says, greetings, fam. Shout out to Apollo Creed's young nephew. What's good? I don't know. What's good with you, Apollo? Shout out to Jonathan says, hey, Sabby and friends. Greetings, Rick says, hey, y'all. Shout out to Steve says, hi, everybody. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Notori says, love the top and lipstick Sab. Thanks. I wasn't sure about it. I actually have to, one of my ring lights is especially bright tonight for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on with that, but I just want to make sure that the camera is focused. Okay. Yeah. Been having an issue. This ring light's been doing that off and on. Okay. I want to make sure I didn't miss you over here. What's going on? Mark says 2023 will be just as bad unless we die in a nuclear. Oh, Mark. Shout out to Norvell says, happy Sabby. What's up, Norvell? What's going on? Roger says, Sabby looking like you about to do a Maybelline commercial. Looks like you're about to spray some cologne on me as I walk through the perfume section of the department store. Sabby and me and so. Listen, when I go to the mall, I dodge the people at the kiosk and I dodge the people. If I have to go through a department store, I try to sprint past the perfume counters because they will hit you. Can I help you for anything? Are you looking for something? No, I'm actually just trying to get to the, have you seen this new? Nope, didn't see it, but I'm actually trying to get over to the shoe section over there. So I'm just going to go ahead and beeline right past you. Thank you. Or if you're walking through the mall and the kiosk people are there and they're always around. I used to try to, bob and weave, try to find ways to get around them or try to find ways for them to not notice me. And one of the things that I found that if you don't make direct eye contact, you can avoid them. Whatever you do, don't look them in the eye and then take off running. Take off running. Someone told me one time that the guys at the kiosk, it's almost like, they said it's like a video game where you can dodge so many of the kiosks in a row. And then all of a sudden there's one more that you have to get through. And that's the final boss. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Oh boy. Shout out to Bryce says, sup Sabby. Hey, everyone. Hello and greetings all. Hello and greetings to all of you. Want to do a quick shout out to Sabby patrons. You guys are in the house. You're always showing me love here. I really do appreciate all of your help and support. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. All of these wonderful people. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. That's kind of cool. I don't think I've seen my name scroll across a ticker or anything. But actually, now that I think about it, that's kind of cool. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron here. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Aubrey and Bobby Aldridge. Thank you so much. A big whoop, whoop to the new patron crew. Okay. Should have a pretty interesting show tonight, guys. We've got some things to discuss. So let me go ahead and grab that thumbnail for you. Let's roll that beautiful bean footage. I still love that commercial. All right. Tonight, we are going to discuss Cornel West and Medea Benjamin are calling for peace. Great discussion there. I can't wait to get into that. I'm also going to discuss Tulsi Gabbard grills George Santos. Good God. If your name is George Santos, you are not having a good week. Not having one. I'm also going to discuss Pete Buttigieg airline issue. Pete is facing some heat again over his job as transportation secretary here. So we're going to get into that story, and it is not good news for Pete. And last but not least, we're going to talk about Alaska wins. Now, those are those ballot initiatives that we've been talking about each night, with each state. I'm actually going to pick up where I left off with Alabama because we stopped at number 5. We're going to pick up here at number 6. That's where we're going to pick up. Where we're going to pick up. So let's go ahead and start there. Let's do it. All right, guys. So we are picking up on Alabama's ballot initiatives here. We're picking up with Alabama Amendment 6. Let me see if I can make this just a little bit bigger. Great. I don't know what happened there. Great, great, great. Beautiful. All right. Alabama Amendment 6 authorized certain cities to use special property tax revenue to pay for capital improvements directly. Amendment 6 allows certain cities that were previously authorized to levy a special property tax to pay for bonds and other forms of debt to also use the tax revenue to pay for capital improvements. Going forward here, directly on a pay-as-you-go basis, the amendment allowed the cities to use such revenue to pay the principal and interest on bonds or other securities being used to finance or refinance the cost of improvements. It also validated any past use of such property tax directly for capital investments. Now, this measure did pass by 60.71%. I want to explain a little bit here about capital improvements. Capital improvements are improvements, upgrades, adaptations, or enhancements made to improve the value of structural integrity of a city's property and infrastructure. Cities in Alabama have capital improvement plans, CIP, that include plans for capital improvements to roads, sidewalks, drainage systems, and public work agencies. So again, this is going back to infrastructure issues here. That did pass. Okay. Let's go to number 7. Now, this is Alabama Amendment 7, Local Economic and Industrial Development Bonds and Financing Amendment. This changes the requirements for counties and municipalities to provide for financing economic and industrial development through the use of public funds, issuing bonds and leasing property or lending bonds to a private entity, including exempting local governments from seeking voter approval for issuing bonds unless the bond issue includes a repayment provision such as a tax increase. So that is number 7, and that passed by 75.41%. So let's go on. Most of these are self-explanatory. That's why I'm not going into too much detail. Alabama Amendment number 8, Public Service Commission to Regulate Private Sewer Systems in Shelby County Amendment. This amendment applies only to Shelby County and required a majority vote of approval from voters statewide, as well as the majority of voters in Shelby County to become a part of the Constitution. The amendment required that the State Public Service Commission to regulate privately owned sewer systems and plants, including their rates and charges in Shelby County. The Public Service Commission was made responsible for implementing the change either gradually or at one time. Until the Public Service Commission determines new rates and charges, the rates and charges were set to remain the most recent rate agreement or the utility's most recent published rate. If a county, municipality, or governmental utility service, GUSC, in the county has a rate control agreement with a private facility, then the county, municipality, or GUSC can choose to opt out of regulation by the Public Service Commission. The Alabama Public Service Commission is an elected 3-member board that oversees the regulation of utility companies, including wastewater utilities in the state. The PSC has oversight over wastewater service. The commission has the power to approve or reject rates and establish rules and regulation for their operation. This amendment passed by 71.56%. Okay. Excuse me, my nose is I'm a little stuffy. Moving on to number 9, Alabama Amendment 9, Public Service Commission to Regulate Private Sewer System in Lakeview Amendment. This amendment provided the State Public Service Commission must regulate privately owned sewer systems and plants in the town of Lakeview, Alabama. Now that's Jefferson and Tuscaloosa counties from January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2027. Now here's a note that Roger Meadows put here. Again, my guess is that they put some regulations on there as a result of privatizing their sewage instead of municipalizing it, which I think is a big mistake. So this is the thing about trying to privatize businesses that really should be public. So you notice it says here, must regulate privately owned sewer systems. So oftentimes, again, when something is privatized, the regulations sometimes can come through the company, doesn't necessarily always have to go through the city or the county or the state. This is one of those situations where primarily only in Lakeview, they have decided that they are going to be able to come in and put some type of regulation there. This passed by 71.44%. Let's go on. Alabama recompiled Constitution ratification. Voter approval of this measure ratified an updated and recompiled state constitution, the Constitution of Alabama 2022. The Alabama state legislature was authorized to update language in the Constitution and recompile it into proper sections following voter approval of Amendment 4 in 2020. Here are some of the changes to the Constitution: arranging it in proper articles, parts, and sections, removing all racist language, deleting duplicative and repealed provisions. Removing all racist language. Guys, in 2022, they still had issues with this. Deleting duplicative and repealed provisions, consolidating provisions regarding economic development, and arranging all local amendments by county of application. So again, this is an example where they actually were making changes to their constitution. That's another thing that some of these states can do. Let's go in and make some changes to our constitution. So here we go. Number 10, Alabama amendment, incorporate voter approved amendments in new state constitution measure. This constitutional amendment was contingent upon approval of the ratification question, which was also on the November 2022 ballot. The ratification question asked voters whether or not to ratify an updated and recompiled state constitution, the Alabama Constitution 2022. The updated and recompiled constitution was drafted by the state legislature following voter approval of Amendment 4 in 2020. Amendment 4, authorized by Alabama state legislature during 2022 regular state legislative session to recompile the Alabama Constitution and provide for its ratification. And here are some of the changes here. Arranging it in proper articles, parts, and sections like the previous one. Removing all racist language. Again, see, they have to come in and say this again. It says Section 256 of the Alabama Constitution stated separate schools shall be provided for white and colored children, and no child of either race shall be permitted to attend a school of the other race. So again, schools were integrated due to the result of Brown versus Board of Education. That was like back in the 60s. Even though it's 2022, some of that old language is still present in the current Constitution. This is why they have to go back in and make these changes. But what is very concerning is the fact that it took them until 2022 to now go in and do it. It also includes, again, depleting duplicative and repealed provisions, consolidating provisions regarding economic development, and arranging all local amendments by county of application. Here's commentary here from Roger. Roger said, holy shit, with Amendment 10 and the question initiative, they drew up a brand spanking new constitution. I'd almost say this is revolutionary, but for the fact they didn't extend initiative powers to amend Constitution to voters via CBI. So yeah, again, this is what I was trying to tell you guys. For some of these states with the ballot initiatives, yes, they can do things like this. They can come in and amend the whole Constitution. Sometimes I think we're selling ourselves short here. I really do when we think about some of the things that can be done. But I imagine there was some type of pressure probably put on them, and that is why they came in and made some of these changes as well. So that's that. Now we're moving on to Alaska. This one is quick and simple because Alaska only had one question. That's why I combined it with this one tonight. We'll get into California tomorrow, and that's a totally different situation. Totally different. All right. Alaska. Now, let me explain to you how it works in the state of Alaska. Citizens of Alaska may initiate legislation through the process of indirect initiative, meaning successful petitions are first presented to the Alaska State Legislature. If the measure or an equivalent measure is not adopted, the law is then placed before the voters. So in Alaska, it has to go through the legislator first. If they don't adopt it, then it goes to the voters. I told you each state is a little bit different. In Alaska, citizens also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. Alaska residents cannot amend their state constitution via initiative or directly initiate legislation. This is different from what you just saw with Alabama, because I just showed you in Alabama, they could go in and change the whole constitution. Unfortunately, in Alaska, they do not have that option. The Alaska state legislature may also place measures on the ballot as legislatively referred constitutional amendments or legislatively referred state statutes. So here's a note here from Roger. I think that's important. No Alaskan CBIs or even legislative initiatives made it onto the ballot in 2022. So there was one question here, Alaska ballot measure constitutional convention question. And that was a constitutional convention is a gathering where delegates propose amendments and changes to the state constitution. So I'm not even going to go into all of this because, again, it didn't make it on the ballot. This would have been a big one, unfortunately, because, again, to be able to go in and make changes to the Constitution, that's huge. But a note here I do think is important for you to see. As of 2022, 44 states have a process of deciding on a constitutional convention. In 14 states, including Alaska, constitutional convention questions are automatically referred to the ballot after a certain number of years. For these states, there is no requirement for a state legislator to vote to place the question on the ballot. For Alaska, Iowa, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Hawaii, the Constitutional Convention question is referred to the ballot every 10 years. So they will have to wait another 10 years to bring this up again. For Michigan, it is 16 years. For Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, New York, Ohio, and Oklahoma, a question is placed on the ballot every 20 years. That's deep. 27 states allow their legislator to vote to put a question for a constitutional convention on the ballot. Some of these states require a majority vote in their legislature, while others require a supermajority vote of 3/5, 60%, or 2/3, 66.67%. 5 states, Georgia, Louisiana, Maine, South Dakota, and Virginia, allow for a supermajority legislative vote without voter approval. And 5 states, Arizona, Florida, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, also have a petition process for citizens to file an initiative to petition for a constitutional convention question on the ballot. 7 states, Arkansas, Indiana, Mississippi, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Vermont, do not provide constitutional conventions. That's important to note. And here's a note here from Roger Meadows. Those delegates they speak of can be lobbyists representing big business interests who could end up hijacking the convention, which is why these cons are usually struck down. So that is Alaska. So unfortunately, there wasn't much to see there because theirs didn't end up on the ballot. And sometimes that happens. Again, depending on the state that you live in, that can determine how difficult this may be or how easy it may be for you. Some states don't have to go through all of these rules. Some states can just easily just put something directly on the ballot, right? All right, let me go ahead. Just want to check Rockfin really quick. And then we will go into the next story. Just want to make sure I open up Rockfin here. And we can do a pop out. Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check that. All right. I really did not think the shirt was that special. Like, Good Cookie says, oh, big time Sabby makes it look styling. I don't know. I mean, it's just a black turtleneck. This is funny. Some of the comments are funny. All right. I think we're going to go ahead into the next story. We'll go to the next story. Okay. If your name is George Santos, you are not having a good week. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about him. He is a Republican politician who ran this year and actually won. Did not win the first time he ran, but he did this time around. So second time's the charm. Second time's the charm. However, unfortunately, George Santos apparently has not been very transparent about his background. Unfortunately, George Santos has outright lied about his background, including his resume. George has come under fire. Let's get into it. George Santos admits to lying about college and work history. The congressman-elect confirmed the New York Times findings that he had not graduated from college or worked at two major Wall Street firms as he had claimed. And let's just take a look. This is George right here. There he is. Let's get into it. Oh boy. Oh boy. Ending a long week of silence, Representative-elect George Santos admitted on Monday to a sizable list of falsehoods about his professional background, his educational history, and property ownership. But he said he was determined to take the oath of office on January 3rd and join the House majority. Mr. Santos, a New York Republican who was elected in November to represent parts of Northern Long Island and Northeast Queens, confirmed some of these key findings of the New York Times investigation into his background, but sought to minimize the misrepresentations. Now, I have to pop out and say this for just a second. Anytime you run for office, the press is going to heavily dig into your background. Anytime. You would think George Santos, this being his second time running as a candidate, George Santos would know that. But you see, I'm going to get into this in just a second because I don't believe it's just George Santos. I believe George is just the one that was caught. George is the one that got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Let's go on. Wait till you hear about it. He goes on to say, my sins here are embellishing my resume. Okay. He said to one of the interviewers for the New York Post, Mr. Santos admitted to lying about graduating from college and making misleading claims that he worked for Citigroup or Goldman Sachs. Mistake number one. Citigroup or Goldman Sachs. Now, those are pretty high profile companies. Anyone working for the press who wanted to double check that background, all they would have to do is contact Goldman Sachs or Citigroup. I'm sorry, but you could have picked maybe more low profile companies to lie about. Like, not just anyone works for Goldman Sachs. So, dude's not a good liar. You should have picked something that was more convincing. Let's go on. He once said he had a family-owned real estate portfolio of 13 properties. On Monday, he admitted he was not a landlord. In other words, in the words of Maury Povich, the lie detector test determined that was a lie. Let's go on. There's many more. Mr. Santos, the first openly gay Republican to win a House seat as a non-incumbent, also acknowledged owing thousands in unpaid rent and a year-long marriage he had never disclosed. See, I told you they'll dig up anything. I dated women in the past. I married a woman. It's personal stuff. He said to the Post, adding that he was okay with my sexuality. People change. This particular piece right here, the fact that he was married to a female before, I mean, I'm not sure what that has to do with his campaign. Like, that's my whole thing. So for that one, I kind of feel like that was hitting low below the belt. Other people have done this as well. I mean, Elton John was married to a woman once before too. Like, that's not something that's uncommon, so to speak. So maybe he just didn't feel comfortable coming out at that point in time. But that is nothing compared to the other lies that he told. The admission by Mr. Santos added a new wrinkle to one of the most astonishing examples of incoming congressmen falsifying key biographical elements of his background, with Mr. Santos maintaining the falsehood through 2 consecutive bids for Congress, the first of which he lost. So I told you he lost the first one. He acknowledged that a string of financial difficulties had left him owing thousands to landlords and creditors, but he failed to fully explain in the interviews how his fortunes reversed so significantly that by 2022, he was able to lend $700,000 to his congressional campaign. See, what I tell you, you got to be careful. Always follow the money, because this is going to come up. JB sends the eyes. This is something. And here's the thing. I'm not one to shame someone for their financial background. Like, that is not the place that I come from. If you come from working class, if you come from poor background, I don't care. Like, to me, you shouldn't be demonized because of that. I think the point that they're trying to point to, though, is that he lied about owning property that he did not own. In fact, he ended up owing money. See, if he just would have been truthful about it, they probably wouldn't have gone as far as they did, not to just say, hey, not only did he not own property, but he also owes money to property owners. You see what happens when you're not transparent? It goes on to say Mr. Santos also firmly denied committing a crime anywhere in the world, even though the Times had uncovered a Brazilian court record showing that Mr. Santos had been charged with fraud as a young man after he was caught writing checks with a stolen checkbook. See, I told you, when you run for office, the press will find everything. They'll find all of it. I am not a criminal here. Not here or in Brazil or any jurisdiction in the world. Absolutely not. That did not happen. But can you believe him now? Mr. Santos is identified by his full name and date of birth, as well as by the names of his mother and father. The documents show that Mr. Santos confessed to the crime and was charged, but that the case remains unsolved because authorities were later unable to locate him. In other words, he took off. In both interviews on Monday, Mr. Santos also denounced reporting by both CNN and The Forward, a Jewish publication, that he may have misled voters about his account of his Jewish ancestry. This one is the big one, including that his maternal grandparents were born in Europe and immigrated to Brazil during the Holocaust. That was another mistake because, again, that is something that they can actually track. They can go back and check that. Oh boy. Ay. Let's go on. He goes on to say, I never claimed to be Jewish. I am Catholic because I learned my maternal family had a Jewish background. I said I was Jewish. Guys, did he really try to do that like the show Blackish? Like, did he really try to pass that off that way? Well, I never really said that I was Jewish. I just said that I was Jewish. This is terrible. This is terrible. I'm going to show you some videos because we're going to prove him wrong as well. Mr. Santos, who has repeatedly said he was religiously Catholic, but has also identified as a non-observant Jew. Oh, God. The Post, that's what he told the Post. His grandmother had recounted how she converted from Judaism to Catholicism. Mr. Santos, through representatives, has declined multiple requests to speak with the Times. Over the course of his campaigns, Mr. Santos claimed to have graduated from Baruch College in 2010 before working at Citigroup and eventually Goldman Sachs. A biography on the National Republican Congressional Committee. Oh my God. See, this is all documented. A biography on the National Republican Congressional Committee website said he had attended both Baruch and New York University and received degrees in finance and economics. Again, as someone who worked in higher ed, those records are always available. So again, this was another foolishness that he had here, because was he seriously not thinking about the fact that they weren't going to go and check if he actually got degrees from those schools? That's easy information to find. I could pick up the phone right now and contact NYU and say, hey, just doing an employment check verification. That's how you do it. Just doing an employment check verification. Just wanted to check and confirm that George Santos graduated from this school in 2010. No? Okay, thank you. Bye. It's very easy to do. Don't lie about where you got your degree. That one's an easy one to check up on. But the colleges and companies could not locate records to verify his claims when contacted by the Times. There you go. In Monday's interview, Mr. Santos admitted to the Post that he had not graduated from Baruch College or any college. Guys. So he went from not having a college degree to proclaiming that he graduated from NYU and Baruch College. Good Cookies said, I got my degree at Trump University. Good luck verifying that one. LOL. Guys, I can't make this up. I can't make this up. Thank you for the super chat. Byron says, hypocrisy has no bounds. Delthea, thank you for this super chat. Lying 101, don't tell a lie that a 12-year-old can Google and expose. Just saying. This stuff is easy to find. What was he thinking? And thank you for the super chat as well, Delthea. I don't like being lied to, but if you're going to lie to me, put your back into it. Show me that you put some work in the lie. That's all I ask. Right? He didn't even try. Shout out to Mary for becoming a new Sabby member. Let's give her a big whoop, whoop. Shout out to Mary there. I don't know what to say, but he really didn't even try. He didn't even try. All right. I didn't graduate from any institution of higher learning. I'm embarrassed and so sorry. This is so embarrassing. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed and sorry for having embellished my resume. Okay, there's a difference between embellishing and flat out lying. An embellishment would be like listing on your resume that you graduated from, I don't know, the University of Michigan, but you actually graduated from Eastern Michigan or something like that. That's embellishing. Embellishing is like saying that, or saying like you had a position and you were really a cashier. Embellishing would be like sales associate. That's embellishing. Santos flat out lied. He didn't go to any school. Like that's not an embellishment. That's an outright lie. An outright lie. Let's go on. We do stupid things in life. He also admitted that he never worked directly for Goldman Sachs or Citigroup, blaming a poor choice of words for creating the impression that he had. Let's be clear here, ladies and gentlemen. How do you use a poor choice of words when you're using the words Goldman Sachs and Citigroup? Those are two particular companies. That's no poor choice of words. I don't know. I don't know. Past statements of Mr. Santos are relatively clear, however. An archived version of Mr. Santos' former campaign website, preserved by the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, says he began working at Citigroup as an associate and quickly advanced to become an associate asset manager in the real asset division of the firm. Instead, he told the Post on Monday he dealt with both firms through his work at another company, Linkbridge Investors, which connects investors with potential clients. Linkbridge, he said, had limited partnerships with the two Wall Street firms. The Times was able to confirm Mr. Santos' employment at Linkbridge, but in a version of his campaign biography posted as recently as April, Mr. Santos suggested that he had started his career on Wall Street at Citigroup and that he was at Goldman Sachs briefly before his time at Linkbridge. You see the difference? A spokeswoman for Citigroup declined to comment. Representatives for Goldman Sachs and Linkbridge did not immediately respond to a request for information. Mr. Santos has not fully accounted for his employment during the years that he had claimed that he was advancing on Wall Street. In a separate interview with WABC Radio, he confirmed reporting by the Times that he had worked at a call center in Queens in late 2011 and early 2012. And my question is this: what's wrong with that? Why not just go with that? What is it about this system that could make a candidate feel that they need to lie about their background? They need to lie about their education, their previous employer. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but like I told you at the beginning of this segment here, I don't believe he's the only one. And I would point to someone like Joe Biden. Joe Biden told everyone that he was a part of the civil rights movement, that he marched with Dr. When did this happen? That was not true. He had to come back and retract that statement. George Santos is not the only one. Elizabeth Warren, supposed to be Native American, right? That came back to be not true. So I want us to make a comparison here, okay? A lot of people are calling for George Santos to resign. Totally get that. But those same people weren't calling for Elizabeth Warren to resign for lying about her background. They weren't calling for Joe Biden to resign for lying about his background. And let's talk about Elizabeth Warren's background for just a second, because again, that's my representative here in Massachusetts. Elizabeth Warren, when she was campaigning, she likes to tell the story about how she was a special needs teacher. Okay. How long she have that job? How long? Because that was a real big selling point for her. I am part Native American and I came from a working class family and I was a special needs teacher. She wasn't even a teacher for a year. She talks about this as if she was in the profession, like for years, careerist. Like Elizabeth Warren also lied about her background. Should Elizabeth Warren resign? This is the problem that we have with the two-party system. When you're one of those people that you are destined to defend your party, you'll ignore it when it happens in your party. Not everyone, but most. You can make excuses for Elizabeth Warren. You can make excuses for Joe Biden. People did the same thing with Trump. This is a problem with the two-party system. All these people pointing their fingers at George Santos. None of them said a damn thing about Joe Biden lying about his background and Elizabeth Warren lying about her background. That's something to think about. Now, one more piece here, and then I'm going to get to the video clip because there's a lot to show here about George, because George made his situation worse. Goes on to say, yet even as Mr. Santos, whose victory helped Republicans secure a narrow majority in the next House of Representatives, admitted to some fabrication, his actions will likely not prevent him from being seated in Congress. Democrats, including outgoing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the next House Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, have suggested Mr. Santos is unfit to serve in Congress. Top House Republican leaders, including Kevin McCarthy of California, have largely remained silent. Now, the House can only prevent candidates from taking office if they violate the Constitution's age, citizenship, and state residency requirements. Once he has been seated, however, Mr. Santos could face ethics investigations, and that warning is coming from legal experts. And actually, he already is under investigation now since that has come out. Now, he talked about the fact that he never really said that he was Jewish. He said he was Jewish. Okay. Let's hear what he said about his family being Holocaust survivors. Listen to this. I don't know what this guy was thinking. Like, I really don't.
I've seen how socialism destroys people's lives because my grandparents survived the Holocaust. I despise this evil system. It's been tried and tried again and always fails. I've seen how socialism destroys people's lives because my grandparents survived the Holocaust. I despise this evil system. It's been tried and tried again and always fails.
What does one have to do with the other? Like, if he wanted to demonize socialism, did he have to include that piece about his grandparents surviving the Holocaust, which, by the way, isn't true? We found that that's not true. Like, what did he have to include that? No. Okay. What the hell does socialism have to do with the Guys, I can't make this up. Now, the person who posted this, oh my God. Jacob, Santos also falsely claimed he's the grandson of Holocaust survivors in his campaign launch video. That was June 10th, 2021, with imagery of the death camps. I've seen how socialism destroyed people's lives because my grandparents survived the Holocaust. This is absolutely pathetic. JB says the Holocaust was never socialist. Thank you. Like, why, out of all the lies that you can come up with, you don't go that far, George. Like, I want to just grab George and say, what the fuck is wrong with you? You don't go that far. Even Warren knew that. Come on. Even Joe Biden knew that. Jesus. I don't know what to say. I don't know, man. But Tulsi Gabbard had some things to say to George Santos, and this was on Fox News, and I think she held him to task here. I want you to hear what Tulsi Gabbard had to say to him. Now, I have two clips for this. I'm going to play the first clip here. When Tulsi basically tells him, you don't really seem to be taking this seriously, you outright lied. So this is what I was talking about. There's a difference between a lie and an embellishment. Let's hear what Tulsi had to say here.
To make sure that they see that this is what
looking for. The results that people are looking for are called into question when you tell blatant lies, not embellishments. And this is, I think, one of the biggest concerns, Congressman-elect, is that you don't really seem to be taking this seriously. You've apologized. You said you've made mistakes, but you've outright lied. A lie is not an embellishment on a resume. You said you worked at Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, but they've said, we've got no record of this guy working for us. You've said you've gone to and graduated from these universities, but they've said, well, we've got no record of that. These are blatant lies, and it calls into question how your constituents and the American people can believe anything that you may say when you are standing on the floor of the House of Representatives, supposedly fighting for them. That's the real issue here.
Well, look.
Before he responds, let me just say something here really quick. This guy is on Fox News. That is the conservative network. If you can't get a pass on the network, that is the conservative network, and you are the conservative politician. You really done fucked up, bud. You really messed up, George. I'm sorry, but you really messed up. And to the point again of embellishing. Embellishing is saying like, I went to the bakery and I got 3 cookies and you actually got 1. That's kind of embellishing. Maybe you got 1 and you got a cupcake, and that's embellishing. This guy lied. So lying would be like saying, yeah, I went to the bakery store and you never went to the store. Like, what? Come on. Come on. Listen to him, guys. Listen to him. This guy is a trip.
I agree with what you're saying. And as I stated, and I continue, we can debate my resume and how I worked with firms such as Goldman and Citigroup.
Is it debatable or is it just false?
No,
is it debatable or is it just
debatable.
False?
No, it's not false at all. It's debatable. I can sit down and explain to you what you can do in private equity, in capital intro, via servicing limited partners and general partners. And we can have this discussion that's going to go way above the American people's head. But that's not what I campaigned on. I campaigned on delivering results for the American people by lowering inflation. I can sit down, and if you want to have that discussion, I'd be glad to, Tulsi, to explain that to you and make sure that we settle the score.
This is not about settling scores. And I think you just kind of highlighted, I think, my concern, the concern that people at home have. You're saying that this discussion will go way above the heads of the American people, basically insulting their intelligence. So not only are you now backtracking on these lies that you've told, but you're saying that you can't explain it in a way that your constituents would actually be able to understand.
I can explain it in a way
if you give
me the time, I can easily explain it for you.
She just gave you the time. She just gave you the time to explain it. And this part right here, let's go back to this part right here. This is so bad.
Or is it just false?
No,
is it debatable or is it just
debatable.
False?
No, it's not false at all. It's debatable. I can sit down and explain to you what you can do in private equity, in capital intro, via servicing limited partners and general partners. And we can have.
There is a difference. I got to chime in here. There's a difference between working for such and such company and working with another company as a partner. So that company is a partner of the company that you work with. There's a difference between doing that and telling people that you worked with Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, that you worked at those companies. You didn't work there. You know, it's like, God, I don't know. It's like you're working at a university and you contract with certain vendors, and all universities do this. You contract with certain vendors. That's like me saying, yes, you know, I was working at Boston University. Instead of saying I worked at Boston University, that's like me saying, yeah, I worked with Deloitte. Yeah, I worked at McKinsey. No, you didn't work at those companies. Those companies were partners of Boston University, and they were people that were contracted out. So yes, they did work with the university, but you did not work with those companies. Jesus, man.
Have this discussion that's going to go way above the American people's head. But that's not what I campaigned on. I campaigned on delivering results for the American people by lowering inflation. I can sit down, and if you want to have that discussion, I'd be glad to, Tulsi, to explain that to you and make sure that we settle the score.
This is not about settling scores, and I think you just kind of highlighted, I think, my concern and the concern that people at home have. You're saying that this discussion will go way above the heads of the American people, basically insulting their intelligence. So not only are you now backtracking on these lies that you've told, but you're saying that you can't explain it in a way that your constituents would actually be able to understand.
I can explain it in a way
if you
give me the time, I can easily if you give me the time, I can easily explain it for you.
Oh, George, I don't know if you have a lawyer, but you really should have had someone prep you for this. Maybe he thought it was going to be a cakewalk because he was going on to Fox News. He's like, I'm a Republican politician. I'm going to Fox News. Tulsi's not going to give me a hard time, right? There's more here. There's more here. Let me make sure I put on the volume booster for this one.
To them. And now I want to put this past me so I can deliver for the American people.
The thing is, Congressman-elect, integrity means, yes, carrying yourself with honor, but it means telling the truth, being a person of integrity. And if I were one of those in New York's 3rd District right now that the election is over, and I'm finding out all of these lies that you've told, not just one little lie or one little embellishment, these are blatant lies. My question is, do you have no shame? Do you have no shame in the people who are now you're asking to trust you to go and be their voice for them, their families, and their kids in Washington?
Tulsi, I can say the same thing about the Democrats and the party. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been lying to the American people for 40 years. He's the president of the United States.
This is all true. And we already talked about this earlier. We mentioned Joe Biden. We mentioned Elizabeth Warren. This is all true. But Tulsi asked you a specific question. Do you have no shame? Now he's going to deflect. Do you have no shame? Yes or no?
Tulsi, I can say the same thing about the Democrats and the party. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been lying to the American people for 40 years. He's the president of the United States. Democrats resoundingly support him. Do they have no shame? I've made this very clear.
This is not about the Democratic Party, though. This is about your relationship, frankly, with the people who've entrusted you to go and fight for them. And I think one of the questions that really probably hits home to a lot of people is are you Jewish? We've got a letter that your campaign sent out earlier this year, which reads as follows. As a proud American Jew, I've been to Israel numerous times for educational, business, and leisurely trips. You said there in that letter that you are, quote, a proud American Jew. How do you explain that?
See, they got quotes. I told you. This is why I was saying this guy should have got a lawyer. He should have had a lawyer before he did any of these interviews. He should have spoken to his lawyer because they already have. It's not like Tulsi was going to do this interview and not have any type of receipts. That would have been like him coming on my show and expecting no damn receipts. So it's just, they had this. Oh.
My heritage is Jewish. I've always identified as Jewish. I was raised a practicing Catholic. I think I've gone through this. Even I've not being raised a practicing Jew. I've always joked with friends and circles, even in the campaign, I'd say, guys, I'm Jewish. Remember, I was raised Catholic. So look, I understand everybody wants to nitpick at me. I'm going to reassure this once and for all. I'm not a facade. I'm not a persona. I have an extensive career.
We got to hear this part again. I'm sorry. This guy, I don't know what to say.
Are you Jewish? We've got a letter that your campaign sent out earlier this year, which reads as follows. As a proud American Jew, I've been to Israel numerous times for educational, business, and leisurely trips. You said there in that letter that you are, quote, a proud American Jew. How do you explain that?
If someone were to ask me this question, it's like someone came to me and they said, Sabby, are you African American? It's a yes or no question. There is no, well, I was raised this way. Sabby, are you Christian? Well, there's no, it's a yes or no question. I'm so confused by this dude. I'm so confused.
My heritage is Jewish. I've always identified as Jewish. I was raised a practicing Catholic. I think I've gone through this. Even I've not being raised a practicing Jew, I've always joked with friends and circles, even in the campaign, I'd say, guys, I'm Jewish. Remember, I was raised Catholic. So look, I understand everybody wants to nitpick at me. I'm going to reassure this once and for all. I'm not a facade. I'm not a persona. I have an extensive career.
Jennifer said, if he is ethnically Jewish like me, my three grandparents were Jews, but he's not really saying this, is he? I'm confused. Exactly. He lied about his grandparents going through the Holocaust. That was a lie. He lied. Like I said, you couldn't be a worse liar, this guy. You couldn't. Did you not think people weren't going to look that up? Now, Andrew Yang said something about this. Let me show you what he said. George Santos took advantage of how weak our institutions are and how polarized the country is. Most congressional races get very little press coverage, and voters will tune out attacks from the other side as politics as usual. If you're considering a run for office, the first question you'll be asked is, how much money can you raise? That's the vet. Only 15% of Republicans express high trust in national media. Among Democrats, it's 69%. Relationship with the media is now a key partisan indicator. Among independents, it's 39%. So this is the point that I want to bring home, because I don't want us to just talk about the problems. And I don't want us to just talk about just one particular issue without looking at the bigger picture. And I think he was right about this. In a healthy system, George Santos doesn't win. We don't have a healthy system. And we don't. The fact that he was able to even get away with this. Like, you mean to tell me nobody looked up this information the entire time? Where are his family members? When he was campaigning and he was telling these lies about his grandparents, did no one in his family say, wait a minute, what are you doing? Why are you lying to people? No one? I got more to show on this, but let me go ahead and Rockfin really quick. I want to go ahead and this is just, it's crazy to me. I don't understand. Thank you for the tips on Rockfin. Roger says, I was waiting for Tulsi to ask the question, is George Santos even your name? Or did you lie about that too? Matter of fact, do you even exist? Or is your existence a lie also? Am I speaking to an empty chair because you were so good at lying that you fooled me into believing that you're actually there? Just like that Joker movie where we didn't realize he didn't have a relationship with neighbor till end. And thank you for this tip as well. Sab, that CD is of extreme wealth. When I drove a taxi, which crossed two districts, mine and his above mine, when dispatch sent me to pick up there, understand those were estates. I never picked up the owners, but either their teenage kids or the help. You have to be buzzed in a gate that opens you and takes a 30-second drive up driveway till you see the home. Me, that's your house. Them, that's the help's house. Here's mine. Me, holy shit. So again, it's the audacity of it for me, I think. Max Blumenthal commented, and he pointed out some hypocrisy here because Richie Torres had to jump in and make himself seen. So Max Blumenthal said the biggest tools in Congress are mocking George Santos to make themselves seem to be less phony by contrast. Now, here's what Richie said. I'm going to show you what he's replying to. George Santos pretended to be a gay Afro-Latino, Ukrainian, Brazilian Catholic Jew whose mother died on 9/11, whose ancestors survived the Holocaust, whose employees died in the Pulse nightclub shooting, and whose net worth rose by millions overnight. Am I missing anything? And the point that Max brings out here, George Santos faked his Ukrainian Jewish heritage. Richie Torres marketed his real background as a gay Afro-Latino product of public housing while shilling for billions in U.S. aid to Ukraine and apartheid Israel. Both are cynical phonies, but only one knew how to get ahead in D.C. Bingo. You know, it turns out Richie knew how to play the game a little bit better than George. You see this with Richie? I am the embodiment of a pro-Israel progressive. Richie Torres is another one that's been a big disappointment here. You see it? Richie Torres to lead Israel trip for Bronx leaders. You see this shit? So, Richie is just, I told you, if your name is Richie, or not Richie, excuse me, if your name is George Santos, you are not having a good week. You're just not. Let me go to some of the comments and then I'll get to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Coca-Cola. Very slippery and sloppy of Mr. Santos. Not sure if he is stupid or just didn't really care. Out of all the lies you could tell, why he picked those? Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Biden and Warren are accepted liars by elites and donors. Right. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Santos pandering for Zionist money will get you a book deal. JB says, you know you lost the plot when a right-winger calls you out and you're a right-winger. Joy says, losers like this guy see what politicians can lie about and get away with it and think, heck, I can do that too. Ashura says, oh, come on, Sabby. Lizzie the Snake went too far with a cookbook. She is half Cherokee and Bernie is a sexist, LOL. Yeah, I called out Elizabeth Warren earlier. Good cookies. Yeah, I was the dean of students at Harvard Community College. That's a good one. Oh my God. Greg Bruce says, seems more likely it would go under my head. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Santos saying he's a better liar. Select him. I don't know where else to go. What else to say? All right, let's get into this story here about Pete Buttigieg. Now, Pete is another one that's coming under fire. And he's coming under fire from people of his own party. I don't know, many of you, how your flight plans have worked out. If any of you tried to fly home during the holidays, but if you have not heard, Southwest canceled another 4,800 flights as it reduced schedule continues. So Southwest Airlines, they've had problems all year. This is not the first time people have called on Pete Buttigieg to speak out and do something here. He is in charge of transportation. That's the position Joe Biden put him in, even though I would say he was not qualified for that position. But here we are. Pete did not do what he was told to do, and Southwest Airlines has continued to sell tickets for seats that they did not have vacant. Some people or some customers have been reimbursed. Some of them are not reimbursed. This is straight up theft. They are getting over on the American people. They are taking their money and they don't have the seats. What's Pete doing? Where is Pete? So let's get into it. There's all the people sitting in the airport. Hundreds and thousands of travelers hoping to fly on Southwest Airlines this week are likely to be left in limbo a few days longer. After canceling roughly 13,000 flights in the last few days, the airline is planning to remain on a reduced flying schedule for a few more days. Now, that's coming from their CEO. All domestic airlines have returned to pre-storm delay and cancellation levels after being knocked off kilter late last week by a severe winter storm. Yet Southwest Airlines, plagued by staffing shortages and an outdated scheduling system, is still paralyzed. Yeah, blame everything. As of 9:30 a.m. ET on Wednesday, Southwest had canceled 2,508 flights for the day, accounting for 62% of its scheduled flights. Thursday isn't looking great either. 2,348 Southwest flights have already been taken off the departure boards. Let's go on. Denver International Airport and Chicago Midway International are registering the highest number of cancellations. But lines of passengers hoping for a rebook are snaking around the Southwest ticket counters from coast to coast. Airports in Baltimore, Las Vegas, Nashville, Dallas, Phoenix, and San Diego are all registering more than 80 departing flight cancellations from Southwest and other airlines. In a video statement, the airline CEO, Bob Jordan, said Southwest is aiming to be back on track before next week. After days of trying to operate as much of our full schedule across the busy holiday weekend, we've reached a decision point to significantly reduce our flying to catch up. Clearly, we need to double down on our already existing plans to upgrade the systems for these extreme circumstances so that we never again face what's happening now. It's not the first time though. And so people are asking, where is Pete Buttigieg in all of this? Jordan also said he's been in touch with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about Southwest customer service commitments. Passengers say lack of communication from the company has been especially frustrating. Some did not know their flight had been canceled until they happened to check the status online. Others say they waited hours to speak to a Southwest representative on the phone. Oh, good luck with that one. In an interview with PBS NewsHour, Pete described such practices as unacceptable and threatened to hold the airline to its own stated intentions. We're going to expect them to go beyond the letter of law in terms of how they treat passengers, making sure they pay for things like hotels, ground travel, expenses, meals, and of course, refunds. I'm going to be watching very closely to make sure they follow through. Apparently, he hasn't been watching too closely because they did not follow through. Now, let's talk about these expenses. For those of you that travel, you know this. When you're traveling, oftentimes, you may have to book a hotel. It's not just about paying for the plane ticket. You may have to book a hotel. You got to pay for your meals, all these things that go along with your travel experience. Those accommodations. So when you get to the airport and they cancel all of these flights, you are now faced with two options. You either sit at the airport and wait it out to see if something else becomes available. Raise your hand if you've ever slept in the airport. I have. Or you turn around, go back to the hotel that you just checked out of, see if you can get a room again for another night if they have that possibility. Either way, you're spending more money. And try to see if you can get a flight the next day. The point that I'm trying to make is this. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a financial constraint as well. So Southwest has something to answer for here. Now it goes on to say, now this is coming from the Transportation Gov. U.S. Department of Transportation is concerned by Southwest's unacceptable rate of cancellations and delays and reports of lack of prompt customer service. The department will examine whether cancellations were controllable and if Southwest is complying with its customer service plan. And for people who want to chime in and say, oh, it was only because they had the storms, you have to be understanding. No, it wasn't. This is not the first time that this has happened. It happened again a couple months ago this year when there wasn't a winter storm and Southwest was selling tickets to people for seats that they did not have. That is wrong. And those people were not getting reimbursed. That's why it became such a big story. One more piece here, and then I have a couple of clips I want to show you as well. It is not the first time the DOT has threatened to crack down on the air industry's operation shortfalls. When thousands of flights were canceled due to staffing shortages in June, that was June when that happened. Pete met with CEOs of major domestic airlines and asked them to detail how they'd fix operations in writing. So, boy, I tell you. Casey Mary, president of Southwest Airlines Pilot Association, says the blame for Southwest meltdown should be placed on the company's reliance on tech and procedures from the 90s when the company was half its size. Employees were left to their own devices. They weren't given the tools to do their job, nor were they given the leadership to answer questions and be able to provide solutions. The airline industry has long been wary of regulations, saying that they ultimately put the cost burden on the customer. And Murray agrees that Southwest is best suited than, say, the DOT to decide what needs to change. But these passengers have to be taken care of. They have lost not only time and money, but memories with their families. This is the point that I was trying to bring home. What you have to go through when this happens. It's terrible, you guys. It's absolutely terrible. Now, I do have a clip here that I want to play because I do want you to hear from some of the passengers that were stranded. I want you to hear from these ladies and gents. Now, shout out here to Case Study QB for this clip. Listen to this, you guys. Wait for it. It says Southwest squanders $7.2 billion in federal subsidies by not upgrading their systems, causing massive cancellations, and the Biden administration says they will hold airlines accountable. Let's see. Here we go. Here we go.
You have staff that would get them home unable to penetrate the communications meltdown and let the airlines know that they are available to fly people home. So nationwide, you have 2,885 flights that were canceled today. Of those, 2,500, 86% are Southwest Airlines, with the other major airlines rebounding. Clearly, this is no longer about the weather.
Our luggage is missing now. It's MIA.
We ended up just completely canceling Southwest entirely, and we're hoping we'll get a refund.
Southwest staff is among those stranded. The Flight Attendants Union provided screen grabs from flight attendants calling into their scheduling center and stuck on hold for as long as 7 hours and 45 minutes. Evidence.
Stop. Could you imagine waiting on the phone on hold for 7 hours? Guys, this is a failed state. This is a failed state. We are living in end-stage capitalism. This is not just a technology issue. I know they want to blame the tech, but this is what happens. Everything is falling apart. It's crumbling right in front of us.
Of what industry analysts say is a failure on the part of Southwest to maintain modern upgrades of their communication and logistics technology.
This will go down as possibly the largest ever meltdown. Certainly in Southwest history, maybe in the entire U.S. aviation history. It just doesn't happen.
The watchdog group, OpenTheBooks.com, says Southwest received $7.2 billion in federal subsidies since the pandemic.
Since they received a lot, we, the American people, we deserve a lot. And after the airline melted down here in the Christmas holiday season, it's evident we didn't receive the benefits for that investment.
What did they do with that $7.2 billion? What did that money go towards? Someone should look into that.
And after canceling 2/3 of their flights, the CEO of Southwest apologized.
The tools we use to recover from disruption serve us well 99% of the time, but clearly we need to double down on our already existing plans to upgrade systems.
A spokesman for Southwest says those billions in federal assistance were for payroll assistance and prevented furloughs. 2,300 Southwest flights are already canceled for tomorrow. Brett?
2,300. Mike Tobin at Midway. Mike, thanks. And as many air travelers remain stranded, the Biden administration is trying to assure Americans that it will hold airlines accountable. Here is White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich traveling with the president on his holiday vacation in St. Croix.
Air Force One got President Biden to his Caribbean vacation, but thousands of Americans weren't so lucky. Now his administration is vowing to hold Southwest Airlines to their customer service commitments for everything from meal vouchers to hotels to refunds.
Earlier this year, especially over the summer, we saw a lot of problems with a lot of airlines, and I pressed them to increase their customer service commitments, to put it in writing. And now that they have put it in writing, we can enforce that. We've been able to get passengers hundreds of millions of dollars in refunds this year alone.
Southwest, pledging to earn back customer trust, may face a long road ahead.
Pete Buttigieg was not qualified for this position. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Pete Buttigieg was not qualified for this position. It's just a position that was given to him for dropping out of the race. Let's think about this for a second. When you look at where people were placed, people that were ended up being part of the Biden administration. Where was Bernie Sanders placed? In charge of budget. Okay, that makes sense. It makes sense to put my former mayor, Marty Walsh, in charge of labor because he, coming from Boston, like he was a big labor, that was a big union guy. He was really big on union. Now he screwed up since he got into DC, but he was really big on that. That made sense. Who came up with the idea that it made sense to put Pete in charge of transportation? What is his experience with that? What is it? There was just something they gave him for doing what he was told to do, which was, why don't you go ahead and drop out this race? So people aren't giving their votes for you. So more of them will go to Joe. Why don't you drop out this race? Well, there'll be something in it for you. So they just put him in a position that he was not qualified for. This is a mess.
Down more than 10% in the last 2 days. There will also be scrutiny from Congress.
The monies that were paid out during COVID, they were paid out to maintain the payroll and to maintain the workforce. But what happened during the 3 years of COVID was that a lot of these workers, pilots and other personnel in the airline industry basically left.
And there may have been trouble brewing.
So she's saying that the payout went to basically prevent like furloughs during the pandemic. 7.2 billion instead of using it. So let me get this straight. So they can take money and use it for what they want to use it for. And that's okay. I guess companies can do this, but we can't do that though. Just keep that in mind. And not saying that the workers should have been stiffed. But what I am saying is, why did they pretend like they were doing what they were supposed to do with that money and say, yeah, our systems are better. We're good to go. We're going to help the people. Things are better now, knowing that's not how they use that money. And I question if they used all of it for that.
Even before the holiday rush, Bloomberg reports the carrier's vice president of ground operations declared a state of operational emergency at the airport after an unusually high number of employee absences, according to a December 21st message to ramp workers. Members of the House Transportation Committee now pushing the department they oversee to probe even further.
I want to see Pete Buttigieg say that he's going to hold Southwest accountable by first figuring out where all the money went when the federal government and taxpayers bail out airlines like Southwest to the tune of over $7 billion. What I first want to see is an accounting of where that money went, because clearly it didn't go to upgrading and updating their technology.
How you just take $7.2 billion and do what you want with it instead of what it was designed to do? Like, how do you just do that and no one questions it at all?
Secretary Pete Buttigieg did face some criticism for not getting involved until this meltdown was several days in, including from House Judiciary Republicans. He responded with a blitz of TV appearances, calls to the Southwest CEO, and pledges to keep an eye on things. President Biden also tweeted a link for Americans to see if they're entitled to compensation from Southwest or any other airline, Brett.
Okay. Now, I told you that even Democrats are speaking out against Pete. People not too happy with Pete right now because it's embarrassing. You have all these families can't get home for the holidays, considering the fact, what was it, just about a year ago, some people couldn't travel because of the travel restrictions, because of the pandemic. So they couldn't see their family on the holidays. Then we had all these rules, at least we did here in Massachusetts. And so now it's like people like, yay, we can go do what we want to do. And they still find a way to fuck this up. Like, it's not cool. Not cool. Let me go to this question here. Simone B says, that's a lie. PPP loans were to keep staff paid while they stayed open. They also had the option of the Main Street loans. See, that's a good point that Simone brings up. Again, I want to know, what did they do with that $7.2 billion? Pete's own party is not happy with Pete either. Because here's Ro Khanna throwing Pete under the bus. And one thing I've said before about Ro Khanna, he'll be the first to let you know, I didn't do something, I did do something. He'll be the first to let you know when people are upset with particular politicians about the way that they have behaved. Ro Khanna will be the first one to speak out and say, I was not a part of this, or that wasn't the way that I voted. Or he'll say, I'm just going to throw you under the bus. So he throws Pete under the bus here. Nearly 6 months ago, Bernie Sanders and I called for Buttigieg to implement fines and penalties on airlines for canceling flights. Why were these recommendations not followed? This mess with Southwest could have been avoided. We need bold action. So let me tell you something. Not only did he call Pete out, but he made sure to tag Bernie Sanders in the tweet. Bessie said he threw Pete under the Southwest plane. It's just, look, he'll let you know. I just want to let everybody know that me and Bernie told him what to do. It's just, he made sure he keeps his hands clean. There it is right there. We told him. And if you guys don't believe it, he even linked the article. Buttigieg under fire from Capitol leaders. He made sure to link the article. And here's the statement here, because I have it right about here. Yesterday, let me make this bigger. I'm sorry. That's very small. Look, yesterday, Bernie Sanders, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, put out a tough statement calling on Secretary Buttigieg to take urgent steps to protect passengers and crew members, including requiring airlines to promptly refund passengers for flights that have been delayed over an hour. See, he made sure, Ro Khanna made sure he put receipts attached to his tweet. And then it says here, today Sanders was joined by Representative Ro Khanna of California in a letter obtained exclusively by the Prosec. Khanna wrote to Buttigieg, the department's incremental response so far has been lacking the urgency, imagination, and boldness to meet the moment and needs of the American people. Khanna credited the Prospect's reporting for raising the visibility of the issue of the airline abuses and Buttigieg's feeble responses. He told me Buttigieg needs to make clear that he has the authority to go after the airlines for unfair and deceptive practices. He needs to lay out a framework for what the consequences will be for canceled flights, understaffing, and misrepresentation to passengers. So long story short, you're on your own, Pete. You're on your own with this one. They are not coming to your defense. So again, maybe it might be time. This is twice this year. Maybe it might be time for Pete to step down from that position. Delthea said, Ro will tell it. Ro ain't trying to let anything just go. Yes, he'll let you know. He did the same thing when that letter was retracted about Ukraine. Ro Khanna came forward and was like, I did not agree with that. I don't know why it was pulled back. Wasn't me. He will let you know. All right, let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Santos saying he's a better liar. Select him. Betsy says, Sabby, the flight attendants should go on strike. That's another thing that could happen. Thank you for the super chat, Apollo Creed's young nephew. My flight was canceled, but I was lucky to get a full refund and a voucher, but I had to spend over $200 on a one-way ticket home on another airline. You guys see like this? And thank you for the super chat as well, Apollo. My sister and her husband had their flights canceled and still haven't been able to speak with Southwest. They had to drive from Texas to Florida. Ooh, I know that was a brutal drive. I'm sorry to hear that, Apollo. See, guys, this is affecting real people, real everyday people. Is like, the fuck? What am I supposed to do? And thank you for the super chat, CE Foy. No more bailouts for any private companies unless we, the people, get a share of their business. Not 1 cent should go to a CEO pay or stock buybacks. Thank you so much for that, CE. Let me go ahead and check out comments on Rockfin, and then we'll go to the next story. It's the rock to the fin. It's the rock to the fin. To the fin. Rock to the fin. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Copeland Morris. Film flamming, regulatory capture, and incompetence are in the driver's seat in this country. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Sabby, I hear it all the time. Every time I pick up at JFK and LaGuardia, sure, I'll hear it tonight. The CARES Act instructed the Fed to repeat what they did in 2008 for banks, except here, they did it for the airlines. At this point, the CARES Act should have ripped ownership away from the shareholders of the airlines and either nationalized or corporatized. Government needs to be shown another way. And thank you for this one as well. Sabrina, as far as what they did with the money, the government instructed them the money was meant to hire new staff and they would get penalized if they fired anyone. So to get around the law, they made it more profitable for them to take an early retirement. They figured that it'd be some years before travel would come back hard. They weren't prepared for it. Most people not coming back if they're retired. Thank you so much for that, Roger. I want to get into this. This is our final story tonight, and this is going to be the topic of the call-in tonight. Cornel West and Medea Benjamin, they were actually on a segment of Democracy Now! Now, for those who are not aware, Cornel West, Medea Benjamin, and other faith leaders have been calling for peace, an end to this war with Russia and Ukraine. That was the topic of the discussion for this interview with Democracy Now! And I want you to pay close attention to what is said here, because I want to say this, and I got to be very clear. At this point in time, anyone who is still trying to push and escalate this war, to me, is problematic, because this is not winnable. And they're going to talk about that as well. If you know it's not winnable, and you know in the end, they're still going to have to find some type of negotiation here, what is the point of them continuing to fight at this time? Let's check it out.
Medea, let's begin with you in Miami, Florida. Talk about the reasoning behind this call and how both President Biden and President Zelensky, in this rare moment, Zelensky's first overseas trip since Russia invaded, how they dealt with the issue of negotiation. You're, though, calling for a truce, and talk about the distinction.
We feel that this war is not going to be won on the battlefield. This is something that the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said. We see that the head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, who has been so hawkish on this, was asked his greatest fear. He said, spinning out of control. If it goes wrong, it could go horribly wrong. We see us no longer marching towards a nuclear Armageddon with our eyes closed. It's with our eyes opened. There will not be a military victory. There must be negotiations. And we don't want the moral center questioning this war to be coming from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Donald Trump, or Tucker Carlson, who are the people now questioning this war.
Listen to what Medea just said. This will not be winnable. There will be no victory. We have to be very careful about having these types of, well, I'm against war anyway, but these wars just to have war. And it's like all this money that's being poured into it. Again, there's profit here, right? Lockheed Martin is making a profit. Northrop Grumman is making a profit. Raytheon is making a profit. How do you guys think those companies stay in business? So at this point in time, we have heard this from multiple people. It's not just from the gray zone. We've heard this from multiple people that say no victory is going to be had here. But our government is continuing to give them more and more money. Zelensky was just here recently in DC, again, asking for more money. Billions and billions going out the door. And for what? It's not winnable. In the end, they are going to have to make some type of peace negotiation. Shout out to Medea Benjamin. She's a real one.
We want it to come from the moral center of this country. That means the faith-based community who understands that we have to protect all of God's creation and that our moral obligation is to stop the killing, stop the fighting, stop the war. And that's why we have called for this Christmas truce.
Professor Cornel West, you are a professor of philosophy and Christian practice at Union Theological Seminary. We're speaking to you in Irvine, California. Talk about why you signed on to this letter and what you think the U.S. should be doing that it's not doing right now. Clearly far and above the major supporter of Ukraine financially, militarily, when it comes to dealing with Russia's invasion.
Now, notice the framing, right? This is the second time this clip I'm playing for you. I think we're maybe 2 minutes in because I started at like 6 something. So we're like 2 minutes in. Notice the framing. Notice how she keeps saying Russia's invasion, right? That's important to note. Listen to this.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry I didn't hear your full question, though, Sister Amy, but that's all right, though. I think it had something to do with the ways in which I would hope we accent how both the American empire that set the context for this situation with the expansion of NATO and pushing the gangster Putin with his wounded Russian empire against the wall, and then the wrong, illegal, and immoral invasion and occupation of our precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters. But we have to be willing to have a moral witness that keeps track of the organized greed, of the routinized hatred, of the manipulated fear, and the chronic hypocrisy of the wounded Russian empire and the American empire that is, of course, has 800 military troops, units around the world, and doesn't want to be honest about its own role. We know that if there were missiles in Canada or Mexico or Venezuela or Cuba, the U.S. military would blow them to smithereens. So we have no moral authority when it comes to dealing with the gangster activity of Putin. We have American gangster activity in our military-industrial complex tied to the White House.
So that piece right there, I don't know. I wish I could have seen Amy's expression when he mentioned the piece about the American bases all over the world, because it's true. Man, I wish I could have seen her face. But it's true. This is something that I think more people need to call out. And I've mentioned this multiple times before. The United States government basically has found a way to police the world. I don't think we should have bases all over the world. We do have them, even in places that you wouldn't think that the U.S. has military bases. And it's almost as if you have like this giant government, this giant eye over the world. And it's like, it's making demands here and there, and it's taking resources from people, and it's basically, again, policing the world. So I'm glad that he brought that up. I am a little bit concerned though about, let me go further into it first. Let me go further into it because there's something I want to say about the money that's going towards this war. And also the fact that, notice so far, and I've watched this whole thing, notice so far, there hasn't been any discussion about the fact that this conflict started 8 years ago. So let's just keep that in mind.
And Reverend Graylin Hagler, if you can talk about...
We're going to skip, dude. Sorry, this is about, but I listened to him as well. I really want you to hear Medea and Cornel.
To the long...
Let me see what she says here. Okay.
This, and then talk about the course of this war. And particularly, I mean, front page New York Times, Putin admits battle failures but fights on. It was a rare admission yesterday, but saying he's committed to the long haul. And President Zelensky saying the same thing.
Well, I think it's important to understand that Angela Merkel, in her interview, also said, why would Putin ever trust the West in peace negotiations? Basically using those peace negotiations not to stop the inflow of weapons into Ukraine, but to start pouring them in even more. And so there is no trust on any side at this point, but there is a need for negotiations. Both sides have staked out their positions, maximalist positions on each side. Zelensky now saying they want every inch of Donbass and all of Crimea back, and the Russians saying they now control and owned these 4 regions of Ukraine that they can't even control on the battlefield. But these are positions for negotiations. But the call for negotiations has to come from Biden.
The call for the negotiation has to come from Biden. That's the piece I wanted you to hear. Because the thing is, if he continues to keep giving him money, that's not a call for peace. That's a call to keep fighting. He has to be the one to escalate peace negotiations. He has to be the one to bring them back to the table and to say, look, this has gone far enough. We need to have peace. We need to negotiate something here. He has to be the one to do it. And so far, he is not willing to do it. So what happens in the meantime? In the meanwhile, they'll continue to give them money. Just continuing to funnel more and more money. That's right, LB. It would be no more billions for you. Exactly. Just funding more and more money to them. And for what? At this point, so more people can die? Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
And it is not happening. We see that after he met with Macron, the head of France, Macron said there are legitimate security interests of Russia that have to be taken into account. So that all has to be dealt with at the peace table. And so what we are saying with this Christmas truce call is that let's be realistic with the American people. We keep pouring more money. Now it will be another $45 billion that will be approved by the end of this week. That's over $100 billion without a year going by that could have been used for so many essential needs here in this country, and instead poured into a war that is not winnable on the battlefield. So We need to be honest about this, and that's why we have this call for a Christmas truce. That's why Reverend Barber will be giving a Christmas Eve sermon on the moral imperative of a truce. That's why we're having a week of protests starting January 13th. February 19th, the Libertarian Party and the People's Party calling for a protest in Washington, D.C. March 8th, International Women's Day, an international call of women to say, stop this war and end all wars. That's what we need to do.
That's my birthday, March 8th. It is International Women's Day. Yeah, I might have to check that out, Medea. I might have to check that out. And there's one more piece here I do want you to hear from Cornel West as well. Let me make sure I get to that point. You guys can watch the full video on Democracy Now!, but I really want to get back to these points here. Oh, did I miss this part? Okay.
On our members of Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, to come out with the only rational position right now. The U.S., unfortunately...
Yeah, this is the part. Yep.
Being allied with far-right Republicans, and secondly, being called by some a Russian apologist.
Of course she had to say that.
I feel that if I were in Russia, I would be in jail for protesting this war. I also feel terrible that my Congress people in the Progressive Caucus were cowed and silenced. I think the 30 who signed on that letter, in their heart of hearts, probably believe that negotiations is the only way. And we have to pressure them more to come out and say that their original stance was right, just as Congressman Ro Khanna stood by that stance on his national television and CNN and got tremendous support for it. We in the Peace in Ukraine coalition have been putting pressure on those 30 Congresspeople to come back out and say, yes, negotiations is the right thing. Yes, a Christmas truce would be a wonderful thing. So it's our job to put the pressure on our members of Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, to come out with the only rational position right now. The U.S., unfortunately, in the Biden administration, has been against negotiations, nixed the negotiations that were going on in late March, early April, and told the Ukrainians, basically, you don't have to negotiate because we're going to keep pouring more weapons in. This is...
And here we are now. And here we are now.
Only helping the weapons companies who actually were the sponsors of a reception at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. on December 8th, brought to you by Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. They are the ones who are getting rich in this. The Ukrainians are suffering. The whole world is suffering from this. And we have to get Congress, all of Congress, to recognize this is not in the best interests of the American people or of the entire world.
I want to add something here that she just mentioned about those companies. Raytheon, one I know in particular, I know people that have worked at Raytheon. Raytheon in particular, they have been known to do like a round of layoffs when we are not in conflict with another. So, for example, a couple years ago, they did a round of layoffs. At least the one here in Massachusetts, they did a massive round of layoffs where they're laying off people. Right? Why? Because if they're not making weapons for defense, well, then they don't really have the work there for everyone to do. So when there is no war, there's no conflict that the military, that the U.S. government is involved in, and whether that is intervention, whether that is drone strikes that are happening as well, if none of that is happening at that point in time, well, then they'll do these mass layoffs and they'll say, well, because we're not making the weapons for the government. There are some companies that do both. They do defense and they do commercial. And then there are those that focus heavily, primarily on defense. This is why I tell you war is profitable. Those companies, that's how they make money. Let's finish up with Cornel West here.
I want to put that same question to Cornel West, where you find yourself on the spectrum, and those that say a negotiated settlement now only serves Vladimir Putin. And Zelensky's push right now is to not only hold ground, but to, with a Patriot missile system, go on the offensive. He says it's the only way to win this war.
Well, I mean, I think Sister Medea's point that you've got 14,000 courageous Russian brothers and sisters who are willing to go to jail for 7 years in order to have some accountability of the gangster who runs their empire, Russia. We need to have an equivalent anti-war movement in the American empire that's willing to put pressure on our political elites. Most of our political elites in Congress suffer from a moral and spiritual bankruptcy because they can't say a mumbling word when it comes to what's really happening on the ground with the heroic struggles in Iran right now. They can't say a mumbling word about the Palestinian struggles, what's been going on for the last 50 years. But all of a sudden they're willing to break dance and act as if they're concerned about domination when it comes to Ukraine. So we want to be consistent. We want to support any people who are dominated, whether they're Dalits in neo-fascist India, whether they're landless peasants in Brazil, whether they're black people and working people in America, whether they're workers in the UC University California system, and not a mumbling word from Democrats like the governor, Caven. We want moral consistency. That's what Martin King was calling for. That's what Dorothy Day was calling for. That's what Rabbi Heschel was calling for in the 60s. That's our legacy. And what that means is we're going to cut against all the grains in the name of truth and in the name also, we hope, of justice and even some beauty.
Let's talk right there for a second, and I'm going to cut it there. If you want to see that full interview, I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. But to that point, our government is not consistent. And this is something we've been complaining about a lot over at RBN. They're not consistent. You know, there's all this passion and empathy when it's a country like Ukraine, but you don't see that same type of passion and empathy when it's a country like Somalia, when it's a country like Afghanistan, when it's a country like Yemen. Bernie Sanders cowardly decided not to bring it to the floor for a vote to end the war in Yemen. There isn't that same type of compassion when it's people from those types of countries. So it's not consistent. It really isn't. But what I was going to say earlier that I decided to hold and wait till the end, one of the things I noticed that was not mentioned, Medea brought up the money issue. One of the things that was not mentioned was the fact that this conflict started 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And Amy Goodman did not mention that. And that's why I say pay attention to the framing. Pay attention to the way the questions are phrased, the way they come across. But I think Medea hit the nail right on the head. The fact that $100 billion, that is money that we could have used right here to help people in the country, in our country, to help people with healthcare, to fix the infrastructure, to fix these broken down schools, to fix public transportation in this country. We have the money. The problem is the majority of it goes to the military industrial complex, and we get what's left. And oftentimes what is left is not much. And then whatever is left, they try to means test it. So depending on what the means testing is, you may not get anything. That's how it works. Welcome to America. But at this point, it needs to end. We got to stop this. Like, I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it, seeing this on the news. I'm tired. I'm tired. So when those movements come up, I'll talk to you guys about those as well. So we can talk about those. A lot of times these are usually in DC, these marches. But now that I know about them ahead of time, hopefully I can make it to at least one of them. Again, you know, it costs money. I got to get there. But we got to do something here. We need to find a way to move forward. Yes? Yes. Okay. So quick check on Rockfin really quick. We're going to talk about this on call-in because I want to hear what you guys have to say here as well. in reference to this. I'm so tired of this money, all this money just going out the door. It's embarrassing. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin. Copeland Morris. Russia is justified in not trusting the West since the signatures of France and Germany on the Minsk agreement were deceptions. And Merkel just admitted that it was a ruse, and Germany's signature was only to buy Ukraine time to arm themselves. Thank you so much for that, Copeland. All right. Quick announcement, and we're going to skidoo on over to call in. Saturday, I will be live, an all-day stream I'm doing on this channel. It's going to be me, Kerberos Media, and Hardlands Media, as well as Chicago Corner. Last year, I did this as well, only with Kerberos Media at that time. It's the New Year's Eve stream. I had a lot of fun doing this last year. We're going to have several different panels throughout the day. It's split into 2 parts, so you're going to see an AM show that starts at 9 a.m. and then you're going to see a show that starts at 4 p.m. and then we'll close it out from there. The piece I sent you in my Substack with that poll, that is actually for the last panel for New Year's Eve. We did this last year as well. It was a lot of fun. The top news stories of 2022. They take that information, and by they, I mean Shane and Jimmy over at Kerberos Media. They take that information, they compile it into cool videos. It was really fun last year when we did this, and we had a panel of people. I think JB might be joining for part of that too. It was fun. It was fun. So you'll get to see me this Saturday. I won't be on the entire day. We're going to be rotating in and out. So I believe I'm on 2 panels tomorrow night, and I get that list from Shane. I'll tell you exactly what the panels are. So I'm super pumped and super excited about that. So yeah, there will be something for you to watch on Saturday if you're looking for streams. But that will be an all-day thing into midnight. And then you can toast with me at midnight. We'll do that live on stream. So it'll be a lot of fun. Anywho, just want to go and give a quick thank you so much for the super sticker to JM. And we are going to go ahead and head on over to call in to talk about this discussion. I don't know why I said it that way. All right, so tonight on Call In, we are going to discuss, this is episode 67, Cornel West calls for peace in Russia and Ukraine. Recently, Cornel West and Medea Benjamin have called for peace between Russia and Ukraine, yet the left remains split on this issue. How do you feel about their statements? What is the best solution for the crisis in Russia and Ukraine? And I think the only thing I need to do now I need to put the link in the chat. I think I forgot to do that part. Whoopsie. Let's talk about that. That's another thing I didn't mention tonight, but we can talk about it on Call In. The left does seem to be divided on this issue when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and I want to hear your opinions about this as well. Why do you think that is? Where should we go from here? Do you think people are just misinformed? And how you think everything else should go. So let me go ahead and grab that link for Call In. Hey, I might start on time this time. What? Share the link, copy the link. And as usual, like on Call In, we also like talk about other segments from the show. Feel free to do that as well. Curious to hear your takes. Doobie-doobie-doo. Okay, it is pinned at the top of the chat. So you got the call-in link. Oh, is it there? Yeah. You have the call-in link pinned to the top of the chat. There we go. Here we are. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.